Hello and welcome to this Tuts Plus series, Tumblr Theming 101. In this video, we're going to look at making a start on creating our CSS for our theme. Just a quick reminder, in the last video, we created the markup for our link post type, our post notes, which are displayed on the permalink page, the pagination, and finally the main footer. So the purpose of this video is twofold. Firstly, we're going to double check the design and make sure we have all the markup required to actually create CSS for this theme. And then secondly, we're going to do some basic preparations. So stuff like gathering all the hex codes for the colors we're going to use, the font sizes, etc, etc. So going back to the design, the first thing I noticed, which we haven't actually created the markup for, is the theme always sits in the middle of the page. Now at the moment we have an aside and a main element. However, I'm going to wrap both of these elements in a wrapping element, so a div with a class of wrapper. I will then use margin auto for the left and right to center this div. Now again, the markup, the classes, and the way I write my CSS is down to myself. I'm not saying that this is a best practice, this is just how I find it's easier or more proficient to write my markup in CSS. So if you feel differently, go ahead and create this yourself, or create it the way you would. So as you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm wrapping both the main and the aside element in a div, and I'll then use this div with margin left and right auto to then center it in our page. So I'm just going to click save. Now, whilst I'm developing a theme, what I do is I will use a linked CSS file that is linked in the top of the head of the theme HTML or the theme markup, and then I will write all of my CSS for a theme, and then I will copy and paste this and include it in line so I can add customization options. I found this an easier practice because I can just click save and I can use my Dropbox folder, and I know instantly that the changes have been applied to the page I'm looking at. It's also worth mentioning that you don't have to use Dropbox. If you have any other sort of cloud-based storage or you have a server to push the file on, you can do that as well. But for the time being, I'm just going to use Dropbox, and what I'll do is I will create a new file in here. I do this silly little thing where I always change the background color of the body to make sure that everything's linked up right. So I'm going to save that. Save its style in my Dropbox folder, and then I'm just going to copy that link, go back to my themes HTML, and above here just then going to include the link to it. Now again, usually when I'm coding my themes, I actually write them in less and let that generate the CSS for me. The reason is I kind of like the nested way that you can write your CSS declarations, and I also like variables. I find it a lot easier to actually have a selection of variables already declared with things such as color, font size, line height, etc. But for the ease of this tutorial, I'm just going to use normal CSS. Actually, one of the tips that I will show you later on in the series is how to actually use less and the string encapsulation to actually write your theme, your customization variables. So as you'll see later on in the video, customization can be a little bit copy pasta, as in you write some code and then you copy and paste it throughout the theme to make sure that the options link up. So we can use less to make that a little less painless, which I will show you later on. So for the time being, we've linked up our CSS file here. I'm going to take this code and then I'm going to install it, or I'm going to paste it into the online HTML editor. And already the background of the theme preview has gone red, so I know that my CSS file is linked up correctly. Okay, so just to clarify, we've added a wrapping div, which is going to be used to center the content, or center the two elements, the aside and main. And then we are also going to use that to help control the widths of the two child elements. Now, the way I would imagine this working from a responsive point of view is I always code my themes, or I code anything responsive from mobile first. I actually start with a 0-pixel media query and then I work my way up. Again, this isn't a tutorial series about best practices. If you prefer using pixels, EMs, RAMs, whatever you prefer using, you feel free to use. I'm just going to use pixels because they're very clear, and I don't have the issue of nested EMs and the calculations required to actually get them to work correctly. The main element, I will actually set a max width of 500 pixels on. Now, the reason I'm going to do this is because of the actual content we're using. Rather than defining media queries based on devices, I prefer to create media queries based on content or content breakpoints. To give an example of this, if we look at our markup, the biggest image we're ever going to have in a photo post is 500 pixels wide. So I can't display an image any wider than 500 pixels wide. And because that image is inside the main element really shouldn't be any wider than 500 pixels wide. That also counts for my text-based content. When I'd made this design, I actually made it so that the text itself was running at 75 to 80 characters per line based on a width of 500 pixels. So I know that this image and this text here is going to have a nice look when it's actually created, and I know that the maximum width it can be is 500 pixels. My breakpoint or my breakpoints throughout my theme are probably going to run something like 0, 540, and then whatever the width is to have enough width to have the side and the main element side by side. Now, the reason I'm saying 540 pixels straight away is I know that I would like to have 20 pixels padding on the left, 20 pixels on the right, and then this being 500. So as soon as I've reached that goal of 540 pixels, I would then look at how I can do something else to maintain the presentation of the theme. But again, I will try and explain this the best I can. This video and the next couple of videos are all going to be CSS related, and they will go quite quickly. So if there's something you don't understand or you would like to know why I'm doing it a certain way and I haven't explained, please feel free to leave a mention of this in the comments for the video. Now, ideally what I want to do is I want to get rid of that red background, and I also want to look at setting up some defaults, some references like colors, etc., that I can stick in the top of the document that I can refer back to as I'm writing the rest of my CSS. So firstly, I'm going to start adding in these colors. So I'm going to class the orange as a highlight color. So just bear with me, it's been a while since I've written CSS without less. Okay, so that's great. So now usually what I would do if I was writing less, I'd actually declare these all as variables, but unfortunately I'm going to stick with CSS for this one. So what you want you to do is just go through and try and take as much away from the design as possible so that you can just reference it, or you can just use the CSS file and look up later. So we'll take the highlight color, we'll take the background color. I'm pretty sure that's FF. Yep. And again, this is just something I do to make my life easier. If you prefer to go to each element and grab the colors as you are creating the styles for them, then you do that. Again, it's just preference. There isn't a right or wrong way. So the color there is 222. And then I'm going to have a paragraph color. paragraphy color. I'm going to have a paragraph color, which will be this color here. Okay. So that's 545454. And then I believe we have a few more grays throughout the theme. We have the divider. So again, remember this PSD has been linked, and I'll make sure there's another link in this video's description. Now, if I remember correctly, the bullet points and the little stroke for the inline block quote uses the divider color as well, but we'll just double check that. Oh no, it's a different color, so we'll take that. Just name that something like quote. Again, don't need to worry about these names. These are just for your own or my own use. So I can just scroll to the top of the file rather than having to go back to the Photoshop file and get the color picker out. So that's the divider color. Now, obviously, these colors are controlled by Tumblr, so we don't need to worry about them. What I'll do is I'll grab this and I'll call this a highlight alt. And again, you can already see that using less here would be pretty advantageous. Yeah. Again, this is another reason why I prefer to use Sublime. I'm just going to turn it down to 2, even though I actually usually go with 4 because the theme is written in 2. So I'll make indentate. That'll make adding the CSS easier later. And then finally, I believe we have the color for the post details. And then we have, I believe the heading and the text color here is the same. Hello, there we go. So it's AC, AC, AC. Okay, and then yep, okay. And then finally, they're just the little timestamp on the Twitter feed. BA. So I'll reuse the color for post details there. Okay, so that's all the colors sorted out now, so I at least have a hex reference for each one. Now, I'm just going to quickly make a note of the font sizing. Just going to revert the file because I haven't got the font installed, which is pretty silly. Actually, no, we'll do the font size and we'll write the selectors. So that's all the colors reference. Now, the next thing I want to do is I actually want to install, or I want to link up the font that is used throughout this theme. Now, as with all my themes, I use Google Web Fonts, and I believe the font used throughout this theme is a mixture of Open Sans and another font or a typeface that I will not be able to pronounce called Montserrat Regular. I'm absolutely awful at pronouncing names for things, so that I do apologise for. So what we'll do is we're going to link up both of these fonts. Again, these fonts, I believe correctly, were picked for one reason, and that was because of their weight. I think when people use Google Web Fonts, they should take into consideration their actual weight, as in not the font weight, but the actual page load they add to the actual weight they add to the page load. So we'll have a look for Open Sans. Okay, so there's Open Sans. Now I'm going to include Open Sans, I believe, as regular, bold, and italic. Now, this is another tip actually, is to, if you are providing themes for other people to use, always try and pick a font or a typeface that has the regular, bold, and italic. So you should have regular, bold, bold, italic, and italic. And for this, I'm not actually sure what font weight we should be using. It says regular, so we'll take 400. Okay, so we're going to have that. And then last one is we use a different font for the titles. And I've clearly got the name wrong there. So yeah, I actually hope this video series shows you that not everyone is perfect when they create these themes, and we do make mistakes, and that's the part of the fun of coding. It's a continual learning experience. So that's both the font faces that I want to use and go to use. Now, as I said, I'm going to include the normal italic, bold and bold italic, and then I'm going to include the bold version of the Montserrat font. Now again, as I said, when you're picking your fonts for a design, usually I like to check the weight and the page load and try and keep it in the green. So that's what we're going to do there. Now the reason I mentioned making sure you include normal, italic, bold and bold italic is that I think I created a theme that only had normal and italic, and obviously there was people who were creating content that had bold and bold italic, and they were like, well, hold on, you haven't got all the styles here, what's going on? And the way that the browser fakes italic or bold is just awful. So if you're ever using Google Web Fonts, I would advise taking some time and finding a selection of fonts you would like to use in your theme, but also taking into consideration not just how that font looks, but also what the impact on the page load time is going to be. So anyway, let's grab the link. So there's our link. Take that, put that into, again, the head of the document. Now, unlike our development CSS here, this link is actually going to remain. So we'll keep that here. And it is possible to actually utilize this to make an option to use any font from Google Web Fonts, which I will try and show you before the end of this series. So that's the font link installed. I'm going to take that. Sorry, install's the wrong word. That's the font link added to our HTML. Then click Save. And then finally, just go back to the CSS. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly take this style out and I'm going to include it in my CSS file purely because it's going to override any CSS I write first. So I'm just going to put it in here, like so, and then fix the indentation. And there we go. I'm not 100% sure why the linters are going crazy here. Known to be slow, blah 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 blah. Alright, okay, so it's just lint in it. It's basically saying that the wildcard is slow, which we know already, but we should be okay here. So I'm going to save that, and then the last part of the adding the fonts to the theme is the font family declaration. Now, in the design, I'm using the open sans for text, so paragraphs, OLs, ULs, etc. And then I'm using the, I have to look at it to actually say the name, the Montserrat font for headings. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy this and make a reference to it. I'm going to call this base typography, base type, base styling, and then that's going to be for the body font, and then this is going to be for headings. So do H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Okay, so the font family for the body will be Open Sans, and then the font family for the headings will be the one that I can't pronounce, Montserrat. And then click Save. Now, go back to here, go back to Edit, and then click Update Preview. Okay. So far, nothing's changed. Let's have a look what we've got going on. Ah, right, that's right. I probably need to define the font weight as well. So the font weight for the body will be 400, and then the font weight for headings, because I'm using just the 700 version of the weight of the font, will be 700. Click Save there, and then let's wait for Dropbox to finish. Okay then. So that is our fonts linked up and our headings linked up. I'll be curious to see why the fonts haven't changed, so I'm just have a quick look. Okay, that is peculiar. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the actual main site, and again, this is a new example that sometimes not everything goes as planned, and I'm probably more than likely just going to leave this in the video so I can try and work out why this isn't going in. Right, so we've got something override. I think I know what it is. So remember we took the reset out, and the reason we took the reset out is because it would be overriding our CSS because our CSS was before the reset. So what is happening is, there we go, I hadn't updated the HTML. So there we go. So there's our fonts, our web fonts working, and they're defined as well. So what I'm going to do now is just carry on just doing a bit of basic typography. So for this theme, we need to get the line height and the font size of the body elements. Now, I'm just going to set the line height and the font size as whatever I've designed for the paragraphs. So 14 and 23. Again, if you prefer to use EMs or anything like that, you feel free. Now, again, with the line height, I'm actually going to try and make this unitless. So 23 divided by 14 is 1.64. I'm just going to copy that and then just round it down to 5. There is some belief that we should be using lineless heights. So there we go. And there we go. So this is actually the live blog, so to speak. So tuts-plus.tumblr.com. Now, as I mentioned to you, here's our pages, like so. Here's our footer, and here's our copyright information, etc. So go back to the theme preview. Now, I think for the rest of the video, I'm going to continue writing the CSS, and I'm just going to concentrate on this preview window alone, because it has each of my 7 post types in, 6 post types even. However, once I've gotten to the point where I've done enough visually here, I'm actually going to then create a post, a dummy for each of the 6 post types that is viewable live on the actual blog. It'll probably be more to do when I actually start writing the media queries. So this is the base typography. Again, go back to the design and work out what your margins are. I'm pretty sure I was working on the margin the same, which would follow the line height. Apparently I wasn't. So I'm saying that all my margins are 30 pixels, which is okay. So this is my starting media query. So what I prefer to do is I prefer to write anything that affects, or anything that is affected by a media query in a media query with a min width of 0 pixels. Now, the only reason is I like to try and decouple that from the main CSS. So if we have elements that widths will change later on, then I would like to define their starting width in the 0 pixel media query. Again, that's just down to preference. So as I mentioned, we'll work on some base layout CSS. So base layout. And the container, or the wrapper even, sorry, is going to be the element that centers the content. So I'm just going to add margin left auto, margin right auto, and then I'm going to use the after to do the, no, actually I'm just going to use overflow, just a bit lazier. I'm just going to use overflow on that to actually make it centered. There's a lot of different ways of making an element with margin left and right auto actually move to the center. So I'm just going to use overflow hidden. And then my aside, I'm just going to float that left. And my main, again, I'm just going to float that left. Now again, if you prefer to use something else like display in line or something like that, you feel free. I have an issue with display in line, and it's that 4 pixels worth of white space. Floats, as much as they can be a pain, they're also quite easy if you, well, not easy, they're simple if you keep them simple. So I'm just going to float these 2 elements inside the wrapper. And then in my 0 pixel media query, as I said, my main element will never be wider than 500 pixels. So I'm going to do that as width 100, and then I'm going to do max width 500 pixels. So the main element will always be 100% width until it reaches a width of 500 pixels. Again, I can probably declare in here and select my side element. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting up both of the elements, the aside and the main, to be 100% width when we start. Okay. Now I'm just going to do some work on the posts. Now, again, the posts, I'm going to try and split this up. I'm going to have a generic post class, like so. And then I'm going to have a specific one, so post.text, post.audio, and so on and so on. I usually try and make these follow my markup, so however I've declared in the markup, so it'd be photo, text, quote, etc, etc. So what I'm going to do here with the post, the default post, or the base post style, so to speak, is I'm going to add a border to the bottom, because each one of them has a border, like so. And then the color of that border will be ED, ED, ED. Sorry, the hex for that border will be ED, ED, ED. Okay, I'll save that. And then I'm just going to have a quick look and have a look at the margins I'm using on these. So at the moment, it starts off, well, the desktop view is 60 pixels, but for the time being, I'm just going to keep it as 30. So there's going to be 30 pixels at the top and the bottom between these posts. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to use padding to create the 30 pixel space here, and then I'm going to use margin top to create the 30 pixel space here. Again, you could use padding if you really wanted to. I don't think it makes too much of a difference, but you'll need to use padding rather than margin at some point to create this space with the border. So I'll just jump in here quickly. Again, I'm including the padding inside of the 0 pixel because when we get to desktop, I might want to actually increase this space, whereas a mobile 121 pixels is quite a lot of space to lose on a screen with a height of 480 pixels upwards. So let's just save that, and then we'll just go back to here. Okay, so as you can see now, we've started to slowly but surely create this content. Now, the thing I need to actually remember here is I'm saying that the posts themselves are never going to be wider than 500 pixels. And as you can see already, we've actually got an issue with this container, this wrapper element, sorry, is wider than 500 pixels. So for the time being, I'm just going to set my wrapper to follow the same suit as the main element. So width 100, max width 100, and then click save. And again, refresh that quickly. And everything ignores it. That's great. Just double check here. Oh, I said it, yeah. So again, another mistake. I've set that to 500 pixels. Save. Update preview, and there we go. So now you can see the actual content is in the center, like so. Now, the one question that could come up here is why am I defining the max width here when I have a max width here on the parent element? Well, when this theme or when this design reaches a point over 500 pixels, I'm going to use another media query to then remove this max width. But I don't want my main element to actually change width, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to define it straight off the bat here. That way it's easier to debug. I can just look straight at the properties for the main element, and I know straight away that there's a max width on it. Now, going back to the design, I'm just going to finish off doing the basics for the footer, and then we'll take a break and come back in the next video and continue this. So the footer itself, we have the 2 action buttons for the post on the left hand side, and then we have the post details on the right. So again, try and keep these modular. So if we look at the markup, we have our article, so we have the post, so we have this class of post, and then remember we use footer inside the article here. So my CSS is going to be something like post, footer, and then whatever element here. Now, we're going to actually have to inspect the markup just because obviously we use the variables and Tumblr is passing these two elements in. Now, the markup itself is we have a class of like button and a class of reblog button, both underscored. So if we do like button and then the same again, okay, so I'm going to make sure they both float to the left. I'm just going to consolidate this just like so. So what we're saying is that both the like button and the reblog button should float to the left. And then for the post footer details, we use the UL. Now, the reason I haven't given this UL class is because it's inside the footer. I don't expect to see another unordered list item inside the footer. So that's why we've given it a class. That's why we're not bothering to give it a class. Well, not bothering is the wrong word. This is why I don't feel I need to give it a class. If you want to give it a class, feel free. But for the sake of this, I don't feel that I need to. So I'm going to float that right. So like the design, we're going to have these over on the left hand side and these on the right hand side. And then click save. And as you can see, this is slowly but surely starting to come together. And because we've set widths, etc. of 100% and we haven't actually gone to specify pixels, it's already starting to be responsive, if that makes sense. Now, probably the one thing we need to look at doing straight away in our starting media queries is actually adding some sort of margin or padding to the wrapper element to give us some space between the side of the window. Now, obviously, I can't use margin because we're using that as well to center the content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use padding because we've got the CSS property of box sizing, border box, the padding will actually be applied to the inside. So if we do padding and then 20 pixels, so what we're saying here is that the padding on the wrapper will be 20 pixels on the left, 20 pixels on the right. And then if we increase this max width to 540, like so, and click save, and then just update the preview. Go back to this. And no, so as you can see here, we have now got a natural space between the content and the window, and it still centers once it is wider than 540 pixels. Now, the reason it's 540 pixels is due to the fact that box border changes where, sorry, box sizing and box border changes where the padding is applied on the box. So, like margin, which is applied to the outside of the element, using box border moves the padding to the inside of the element. So if your max width on that element is 500 pixels and you have 20 pixels padding on the left and right hand side, then the actual maximum width of the content inside that is going to be 460 pixels because you've actually taken away 40 pixels for padding. So what I'm going to do is just bump up that max width to 540 and we should be good from there. Now again, I would probably use another media query at about 540 pixels, or not even 540 pixels. I'll probably use actually one more media query on this and we should be okay. Yeah, we should be okay with one more media query. So just to try and clean up a little bit more of this footer, we'll go to the design. And again, as I mentioned, the great thing about actually coding a design is that you can change things as you're going along. So if you feel like I did then that I felt that the space between the two posts would be too large, then you can make a change with that. So what I want to do is I just want to clean up this footer area. So I would like the first two ULs to be on the same line, and then the the first two LIs to be on the same line, and then the third LI to be on the last line. Now, there's one or two ways of going about doing this. Again, you could use nth child, but because I'm doing I'm supporting Internet Explorer, I'm just going to add a class of date, a class of note, count, and then a class of tags, like so, and then copy that. And again, I'm not saying, once we create the market, that's finalized. The whole point of this is to go back in and make little tweaks and changes to make things easier for you as you're coding the theme. So now we have post, footer, and to try and jump going so deep with our selectors, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to define these classes straight away. So rather than going ULLI, I'm just going to go date and then post, footer, and then finally no count. So with these two elements themselves, I would like them both on the same line. So I'm going to give them both a width of auto. And I'm also going to text line right. Now I'm pretty sure I'm going to float them right and maybe change the order of the markup, but we'll do that in the next video. And then finally, for the footer, tags, I'm going to do width 100%, and then I'm going to also do text line right. But what I'm going to quickly do here is I'm actually just going to write another property or another rule even. Li. So this will be apply to all the LIs. I'm just going to text align them like so. And that's how I'm going to end up doing that. So that's the footer done. Now, there are two ways we could go about actually controlling the width so that these tags never actually overflow here. And I probably think the easiest way to do it would be to set a max width. A percentage for the footer UL. So for the time being, we'll set a width of 75%. And I'll just go back to the preview. It's definitely the wrong button. And then update preview. Okay, so it's starting to come together. Now, what I'm going to do for the next video is I'm actually going to now create a dummy post for each of the 6 post types, and I'm going to work directly with the live site. The reason being is that there are a few things on the theme preview that I can't actually get to, such as the pagination and the page list, etc. Plus, I think it'll just make things a little bit clearer in the next few videos. So I hope that this video made sense and that you enjoyed watching it, and I hope you'll join me in the next part when we continue to write the CSS for this theme.